My first question will be, what do you think what are the perceived benefits in the digital banking, Samesh?
Mm. So that's a great question, because there seems to be a headlong rush, as Chumleng was talking about, to adopt a lot of technologies, etc. And I think one of the key areas why digital banking is taking off in such a massive way is the ability for the bank to reach a much wider customer base. We bring lots of new products, services to market. We can test products and services very quickly, implement those that work, and retire those that don't very quickly, based on a particular demographic. It allows the bank to scale much faster. So, for example, you would typically have, in previous times, if you wanted to attract a particular customer base to your branch, for example, you would need to open a branch in an area where that segment would frequent. So if you wanted to attract higher LSM customers, you would probably have to go off into a higher LSM mall, for example. And there's a time value in that, because it's most likely you would not, as a bank, have had that similar thought. Right? The other guys would have had the same idea, and it becomes incredibly competitive, and you've got to stand up a lot of infrastructure. Whereas with digital, every customer or potential customer's mobile phone is essentially their bank. You're able to create this combination of digital and physical, in a hybrid banking model that allows you to move faster and to scale a lot quicker. Also, from a digital point of view, it's 24/7, right? The bank is open as long as that app is functional and working, and we're able to, I suppose, retain customers a lot better as well, because the competitors are in a similar boat, right? They're all launching digital banks as well. So there's a competitive play that if you are not in the digital space, the other guys are doing it, and you're potentially going to lose out. So it is a customer retention strategy as well, being forced as part of the strategy into the organization.
What will be the key steps to secure us in this digital
Mm.
age? What are the key steps you suggest to our audience in terms of
Yeah.
this digital age, and in the transformations, in the digital transformation, customer transformation,
Mm.
in RTOs also, and RTO, sorry, and again, how we can do these steps? What are the key steps we should follow in terms of this digital steps in covering on our cybersecurity? Thank you.
100%. If you just allow me, I'll just take a little slightly wider view of that, right? Because we've always, from a cyber perspective, have had to have a recipe available, right? People have always asked, what's the recipe to secure ABC? How do we go into secure virtualization? How do we secure mobile? How do we secure BYOD? And there's always these kind of dynamic shifts and trends and patterns within the technology space. I would say that there's a new technology, and we then have to go off and conduct a bunch of analysis and research, figure out what the key risks are, and take a risk-based approach, and kind of identify what needs to be implemented from a people, process, technology perspective across the dimensions to manage that risk to an acceptable level in the organization. Right? We've had several organizations. I remember this probably about 10, 15 years ago, where banking organizations, wouldn't allow laptops. And if you think about the current landscape, most people are working from home. They have a bank-issued laptop. They have a bank-issued mobile device. They have a bank-issued iPad, or they're using their own personal iPad. But 15 years ago, that was definitely not the norm, right? If you wanted to work at the bank, you needed to be at the bank, physically at the desk. And I'd like to think that we've matured. But what was taboo a while ago is now just general, part of the landscape. You can't imagine working without a laptop. So 15 years ago, there was a lot of focus around how do we secure laptops. Then it became, how do we secure mobile phones? Then it became, how do we secure the network when we've got all these different people working externally to the organization, contractors, service providers, etc., coming into our organization. And then probably about 3 to 4 years ago, maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, it started around, what are we doing around cloud? There's this cloud thing that people are talking about. What do we do with that? And there's always been these technology trends. I think one of the most critical areas I think that digital introduces is that the velocity of change is far exceeding cyber's ability to keep up. I think that is the first piece of this. So if we are as cybersecurity professionals looking and risk professionals looking at this space, um, we are personally seeing in our organization technologies being brought into the organization, living for 6 to 12 months, and then being retired to move on to something else. So by the time you are able to actually get your mind around what are the risks, what are the challenges, what is going on in this digital space, and you come up with an answer, oh, it's too late. It's no longer required. It's null and void. So this creates this dynamic tension between digital and cyber. So you have the digital organization that is moving really, really fast because they have almost, in many organizations, been given almost like a carte blanche. They've been allowed to kind of explore, experiment, do things, move at a pace that is, with the latest, greatest Chinese toys and stuff like that. And here we've got the cyber guys coming along with our compliance checklists and our regulatory frameworks and our risk management techniques. And we want to audit this thing and we want to pen test it and we want to do all sorts of crazy things. And the guys are like, yeah, that was like what we wanted last week. This week we're doing something completely different. Where were you last week? So, it's about the speed of change, it's the velocity, the veracity of this change that is being brought into the organization. There's this perception at an executive and at a board level that cyber is important. And I see this, cyber is important. We need to do something about it. You've got carte blanche with a budget. If you've got a business case, you can actually get the budget. That's not really too much of a problem anymore. But there's an expectation that there's 100% management of all the cyber risks all the time. So people are saying, well, we can experiment and we can fail fast and we can do all these things, and that we hear in the digital talk. But when you bring it into cyber, it's like, yeah, we want to do all of that, but we want to be 100% secure all the time. And that's not possible, right? We know from a risk management perspective, there is always going to be a percentage residual risk that you need to absorb into the organization, that you're going to insure against, or that needs to be communicated and constructively negotiated all the time. So there's this kind of huge focus that because we're allowing these digital guys to go and do whatever they need to do as fast as they need to do it, cyber, you need to be the best watchdog you could possibly be, and you need to be covering all the bases all the time, and that's just not possible. So it's that creates these gaps where there's room to maneuver for threat actors and for threats in the organization. We're also seeing this growth of customer expectations. If you run a digital platform, that platform must be available 24/7. It doesn't matter if there's an earthquake, a typhoon, a hurricane, the building's burnt down. If your app is not available for 5 minutes, they're all over social media saying, this is the worst bank ever. I hate this bank. I want to go and do something else. It's a typical customer. Of course, they don't do that, but it creates the opportunity for them to do something. And then immediately you will have, everybody phoning to say, what happened? Why did this app go down? What's going on here? So there's a lot of these forces internally in the bank that are cultural issues more than actual technology issues, right? And in many large organizations, cyber is not also able to 100% go and tick the box and come up to you and say, Fahim, you're the CIO, you need to do ABC, and I want you to do it by tomorrow morning. Thanks very much. Report back. That's not how it works, right? Cyber is a support organization. We work collaboratively with the rest of the business. It's a negotiation. You need to understand what the perspectives of the CIO that you're dealing with are, and negotiate a position, and go through a whole kind of, let's say, a whole pageant in sometimes in order to get the point across. Because the CIO's main priority is not to secure the bank. That's the CSO's responsibility. The CIO has a responsibility around other things, customer satisfaction and products and services and all those other things. Cyber is just one other thing on his agenda that he needs to take care of. So getting the airtime, getting the space and the mind share in the organization itself from a security function perspective is tremendously challenging, and everybody says, well, cyber is important, but it doesn't make any money. Digital is important, and it actually does make money. So guess where we're going to put our investments, right? We listen to the cyber guy, but we're going to put the money in the digital because they actually bring in revenue. That's what they do. The cyber guys are insurance or whatever the perceptions are, right? So it's this very complex web of cultural dynamics within the organization that makes cyber execution extremely difficult. I don't think there's been a shortage of cyber tooling. I think there are far too many cyber tools in the market. It confuses customers and confuses people when they want to buy something. And we look at Gartner and say, oh, Gartner says this, so we must go and do that. Is it really fit for purpose? Are you going to get price, performance, and value from that tool? Do you have the skills to build durable service around it? Those are the questions. We just think we buy a tool and automatically the world is solved. We've solved that problem, and yet we still sit with identity and access management challenges, data leakage issues. We still have challenges around how do applications, evolve and become retired. From a large banking perspective, we've got a lot of applications with this hard-coded usernames and passwords. What do you do with this? It's a critical banking application. It's been there for 30 years. It's not going to get retired anytime soon. What do you do? So there's a lot of these things that actually come along that actually impact on cyber's ability to be effective at scale in a large organization.
Great, wonderful answer. And this also poses another question actually. And I just want to let you know that there are a number of people who are listening to you right now. They are from the background of
Sure.
IT also. So there's a question which I think that we should also ask related to that one. So what are the key challenges which you think that which we are facing in terms of IT and OT in the convergence as part of their ongoing digital transformation? What are the key steps or the key challenges they are facing, and what should be the solution? Thank you.
Yeah, so I think this plays on to some of the question that you asked previously. What is the recipe for cyber at the moment, right? What do we need to do in order to secure our environment? So if you look at some of the key threats that are emerging, right? One of the key threats that's making headlines everywhere is around ransomware. And if we think about it, ransomware is just an evolution of malware that we've always had. We've had viruses and worms and Trojans and spyware and all these different types of wares. And now ransomware is fast becoming the number one most destructive tool that attackers have in their arsenal, right? So there's a ransomware angle. Then we've got the denial of service piece that's making an appearance. It's denial of service has really not been a huge focus across Africa in general, because I think our reliance on digital wasn't that high, on being online all the time wasn't that high. We had our fallback in terms of a branch environment. But now with, as I said, the expectation of 24/7 availability on our internet banking portals and mobile apps, denial of service attacks are actually becoming more widespread. And especially with the connections with fiber, etc., into the rest of the world, large-scale attacks are actually quite possible, right? Then we've got the aspect of the digital transformation itself. So with cloud, mobile, DevSecOps, and these new ways of working in the organization, that's also introducing risk and introducing challenges, right? So there's a number of moving parts. And if you look at some of these things, so if you look at ransomware basically will utilize the old and trusted attacks, phishing, vulnerabilities, etc., to find an open door into the network and then propagate extremely fast and lock up your environment, right? And in some cases, the ransomware moves so fast that if you are running a data center that is in active and a standby mode, or in an active mode, both copies can be encrypted before you actually have a chance to stop the attack, right? So in that case, some of your scenarios you should be planning for is, what is your ability to recover the bank from scratch? I know it sounds drastic, but these are the scenarios and war games that we are playing, because there are possibilities, there are scenarios where, in the banking environment, there's so much of interrelationship between the different components, between the different applications and the platforms. You can't say that, okay, if we lose those 10 databases and those 10 applications, the bank can still function. Sure, you might be able to for a while, but that is premised on the fact that you are able to contain that ransomware to only those 10 systems and those 10 databases, right? That it doesn't run crazy across the entire network, and lock up everything else as well. So in the ransomware scenario planning, you should be looking at what is our backup strategy? How do we conduct DR? What are our resilience plans? Who talks to whom? So in South Africa, for example, we've had a couple of cases now where high-level government departments, the Department of Justice that deals with all the courts, etc., they've had a massive ransomware attack. They are basically out of business. They cannot process anything. They are down. We've had several telcos in the environment also being affected, right? And the question is, okay, in those scenarios, learning from what we're seeing in the market, what can we do? How do we build trust in our computing platforms? How do we segment the network? How do we harden our hosts? What's our vulnerability management program? These are the kind of, not just what's our vulnerability management program, what are our vulnerabilities what is the vulnerability management program telling us? Where are the gaps? Where do I need to focus? What is my user awareness program like? Do users know about ransomware? Do they know that it's spread by phishing, that it's spread at a network level through network shares? How do we engage our users to make them more cyber smart? They're never going to be cyber professionals, but to think twice before they click on a link that says, something that sounds too good to be true. So, you need to kind of look at those areas as well. And if you hear what I'm saying, it comes back to kind of understanding your environment. In the IT, OT world, from a banking perspective, OT is, you could view your ATMs as an OT environment, right? So if you took a threat like a ransomware attack into that OT environment, what would be your ability to detect that something was going wrong? How fast could you respond and react, considering that a ransomware attack moves at about 10 to 12 machines per second? So, if you've got a network of 120 machines, that's 10 seconds. They're all basically compromised if they were vulnerable. So, how have you hardened your infrastructure? How have you built your threat management program? What are the vulnerabilities that you're protecting against? Many of the banks that are at scale don't have the ability to patch all the vulnerabilities all the time. So they'll take a view that says, if it's a critical or a high-rated patch, we are going to deploy those. So it's trivial for a malware writer or a ransomware writer to basically go off and just say, listen, I'm going to target a whole bunch of medium-level vulnerabilities. It might be more difficult from a code perspective and from a delivery perspective, but chances are I'm going to get a much bigger blast area, because we know that guys are not patching criticals. They're not patching mediums and lows. They're only patching criticals and highs, right? And that's just talking about a Microsoft environment. What are you doing in the Oracle space? What are you doing in the Swift space? What are you looking at on mainframe? Those environments that are traditionally not part of the user land, but they're all connected on our network, right? What happens to your bank if your mainframe is attacked by, a ZOS ransomware strain? What then? Does your payment system fall over? What happens if all your and the thing is, another critical issue is around third-party risk. We've seen a lot of areas where the bank itself might have a level of security and capability because of all the regulation, etc., and the skills and the capacity we have. But we might be relying on a 5-person third party that is directly connected into our environment. And they might be the weak link. They might be the guys who are broken into. They get the ransomware and then introduce it directly into our environment. So what is our view around our capability to cover off all our third parties as well? And the last point I want to talk about was this cloud DevSecOps model as well, right? If we look at the IT space, as I said, digital is moving really fast, and that means that development is no longer in this waterfall. We don't build this system with lots of gates, and then after a while we go off and we say, well, here's the product security, please come test it, and we'll take it into the environment. In an agile kind of sprint framework, there's often a week, 2-week sprint, and something is being delivered. In a CI/CD pipeline, continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline, there might be 4 or 5 code deployments in a day into the same environment. How does security move at the pace where we can risk manage something 4 or 5 times a day? There's no way that we as an external team can come into an environment. In Absa, for example, we've got 3,000 developers. There are 215 CI/CD pipelines that we know of. How do we go off now and take our security function and scale it across 3,000 developers and 215 pipelines? It's just the numbers just get crazy, right? And then Tumeling was talking about the fact that we've already got skills and coverage gaps. You just can't find the people to, and it's not going to be cheap to do that, right? It's going to be hellishly expensive to do that. So you've got to build that capability in the developer stack itself. You've got to get the developers to actually become security champions. And you look at models like BSIM and all these other things, they tell you how to do those things. But it is something that it's hard. It's not something that is trivial that we can say, here's the tool, turn this on. It's not in our span of control. It's hard. We are relying on other people to do the right thing for security at the pace that they are moving at. And that is just going to create gaps that we might not even see until something bad happens.
Thank you so much. We have only almost 5 minutes left. So I would like to ask, maybe because some of my questions you have already covered, I would also like to ask about the cloud security, DevOps, and again, on ransomware controls, which you have also answered in your speech. So I would just like to say again that maybe you want to give your overall viewpoint on cyber proofing your bank, and again, maybe your last thoughts to our audience. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's now more than ever. Thanks for me. It's critical that cybersecurity and cybersecurity professionals look at an outcome-based view. I think something that as a cyber professional for more than 20 years now, having seen this kind of technology-led risk management position where we look at the threat and we go through a model and then we go off and we kind of build a whole bunch of tooling. That's all well and good when you are on-prem and you've got control of that environment. In a cloud environment, for example, where you are using containers, you might end up with an environment, actually from our own experience, we went from 20,000 containers to 500,000 containers in not even a couple of months. How do you scale to actually cover that, right? The other thing is around what are the key risks you're trying to manage? What is the outcome you want to deliver for the bank from a cyber perspective? We get very trapped and caught up in the tools and the technologies and the, whatever the marketing, headline is for the day. Now it's ransomware. How do we move past just taking a very tactical approach and looking at a longer term view? You need to deal with the tactics. I mean, ransomware is something that's knocking on everyone's door and it's going to burn down your house if you let it. But that can't be the only thing you do, right? You can't focus all your effort here and then wait for the next thing and then move to that. So how do you have this mode of where you're looking at things tactically? What is the clear and present danger now? And what are the things that are emerging? So you've got to have a really strong threat intelligence capability. Also, you need to be testing your own environment. Guaranteed from a banking and financial services perspective, the attackers and the hackers are testing us all the time, whether we are aware of it or not, right? We counter probably 1,500 attacks per hour from our SOC because we have visibility of what's going on. And that's not like us actively countering a 1,500. That's probes at a network level, the firewalls detected, and we're getting rid of those sort of things as well. So you need to be able to kind of have two speeds. What are we looking at now? What's emerging? How do we cater for the next thing, right? From a cloud perspective, the cloud providers, if you choose, and cloud providers, I'm talking about like Amazon Web Services, Azure, Google Cloud, IBM SoftLayer. They have taken a lot of care and effort to build out security as part of their core offering, right? Because this is kind of like a hygiene factor. It's a ticket to the game. If we think about a bank's primary focus is to manage money, right? Deposits, home loans, risk, those sort of things. That's what the bank does, right? Security is a player in that space in order to enable that operation. And it's sometimes it gets a little bit convoluted and lost in the business of banking. But if you look at a cloud provider, right, they are a technology provider. A core part of what they have to do is make sure that the platform is secure. If it's not, no one's going to use it, right? Banks, we have breaches and we recover and we can kind of move on a little bit and manage, do some damage controls. But if Amazon was taken offline by a massive attack, ransomware attack or something, everybody lost their data, nobody would use Amazon again. So for them, it's an existential imperative that they ensure that their systems are secure and that they're able to recover and that they can provide you with data security and integrity. If you go to Amazon's, I'm just using them as an example, but if you look at Amazon's website around their security credentials, they have more compliance certificates, SOC 1, SOC 2, ISO, PCI, you name it, than most of the major banks across Africa have combined, right? So they take that really seriously. And likewise for Microsoft, etc. So when you move to a cloud provider, chances are their ability to execute and provide security tooling and platforms and capabilities sometimes might exceed one organization's ability to do so. So moving to cloud and being able to adopt and integrate those cloud platform technologies in your stack is where the rub lies, right? Just because the tooling is enabled in the cloud platform doesn't mean it's there by default. You might have to go and switch it on. So it comes back to skills and capabilities and the knowledge of how to do that, right? But cloud in general, I think we've demystified cloud a lot over the past 3 years. There seems to be a lot less hesitation around it. And that's at an infrastructure as a service perspective. But you might need to actually be aware of all the governance and the risk management and compliance imperatives that come around cloud that might trip you up. I don't think it'll be the cloud technology. I think it might be things like making sure you are compliant to your regulatory stance and your regulatory positions around data privacy and data sovereignty.
Great. Samresh, we have really learned from you and you have really covered it well. The information was excellent and it was to the point. You have really covered the perceived benefits. You have covered what are the key challenges, ransomware controls, cloud security, DevOps. We have really actually enjoying listening more from you, and especially how the adoptions for the cyberproof in this digital transformation. Thank you so much, Ramesh, again, and we wish you all the best.
Thanks, Fahim. Thanks, team. Cheers. Bye-bye.